makes a difference to me. So.
Okay, I'm Sharif, and I originally from Brooklyn since I came to the U.S. Staten Island. I just moved to Home Deal about a year and a half ago. Actually, one of the first people I got to meet was Eddie. I've only had from before. I've known many of you from before, but most of you I met here. I'm married, have married my wife, have 4 children. As you can see, I mean, my hard drive is full of medical stuff, you know. I don't really give talks that much, but I think the trick worked, so I'm here in the meeting. The reason I don't come that I have service in a college class at the same time on Friday, so sometimes it's very hard.
هو المشكلة إن إحنا ممكن نكسبك فور ذا ميتنج ونخسر المجموعة دي كلها.
Thank you so much. You did very special. So Ihab بنبه عليا قال لي, you know, he gave me some instructions. He said, number 1, this is not a wa'za. I said, حاضر. He said, number 2, this is not a lesson. I said, حاضر. He said, number 3, you know, ما تطولش.
So I'm looking out for you guys.
So he said, I'm not going to tell, and he said to make it an interesting discussion. So one of the things that just I thought about myself for a while, so just to bring it for a discussion, I didn't want to, and I asked Ihab, I gave him a couple of topics, and I said, Salam. Or there's no tickets? So I asked Ihab about a couple of topics, and you know, he said that this would be something nice. There is a book by that title, by the way. I'm not, you know, some of my titles are from the book, but the, you know, the things that's in are not necessarily from the book. But some of the things that just occupies my mind all the time is, I mean, this is it? Like we're born, right? We have a date of birth, we have a start point, and then, you know, God gives you a long life. ربنا يديك طول العمر كلكم يعني to live in 100 and 200s, but I mean, eventually there's an, you know, an end point, and what's in between is just going very quickly. Like, you know, I mean, days and years pass by, and it's just amazing. And I have a 10-year-old that we were looking at her pictures when she was a year old, and it's just amazing how the time flies by, right? So I keep asking myself, is it? Like, you know, start point, work very hard. You know, I always like to use the khalat, you know, rationale that the khalat starts on Monday at 7 a.m. and ends on Friday at, you know, 6, 7 p.m. And then there's a reset for Saturday and Sunday, and then that khalat keeps going again and again, and then a week after. So is that what God wanted for us, or, you know, this is something that just occupied my mind. And then one other thing that a lot of people talk about, this whole thing with this, you know, midlife crisis. They say it's something between the age of 45 and 65. They always talk about it. And if you talk to someone at work, you know, they tell you, oh, it's my, you know, midlife crisis resolution. You know, it always has to do with cars or something fancy to buy, whatever it is. And believe it or not, the research, the medical research said that there's no real midlife crisis, there's no disease called midlife crisis, but they actually agree that there is a phenomenon. Yani, في ظاهرة اسمها midlife crisis, but it's not a disease that you can find in a textbook, for example, or a psychology. But apparently men who, you know, go into that age category, somewhere between the 40s and the 60s, suffer from some symptoms. Some, you know, deep sense of remorse for goals that not accomplished. Oh, there's always regrets. I should have done this, I should have done that. Maybe I should have, you know, joined that, you know, business or that project. Maybe I should have moved to Florida, to Texas. I should have done this, I should have done that. I should have jumped in that stock. I should have. There's always regrets. It's full of regrets. And then even, you know, a lot of people that I meet, and they're doing very well in every aspect, family, financially, and so forth, they're just not happy. They're just not satisfied with what they accomplished in life. And it's amazing that, you know, like when we were younger, you just don't care. People, you know, make fun of you or pick on you, and you just always like, you know, want to just have a good time. But you get very sensitive when someone makes a negative comment about you. So someone says that, you know, Eddie was, I'll pick on Eddie because he's my friend, some of you, you know, Eddie today was singing in the microphone in the liturgy, and I just, you know, his voice was like terrible. Then you get very sensitive when you hear something like that, or somebody makes a criticism toward you. I get very upset when a patient writes a negative review about me. You know, it hurts so much, and you don't want to have anything negative. So, and again, you know, the hair is going away, the kirsch is coming about, you know, everything hurts, the joint, you always want to feel that you want to be younger. So apparently this phenomenon is true. And again, you want to spend more time alone. I think Hadbat al group, something about that.
Megan not here.
Yeah, it was just sometimes like you just want to be left alone. Like, you know, I do this a lot at work. I go in, just close the door, and I don't want to be bothered. Yani. And you know, they also say that they're either, you know, issue with sexuality and relationships. Sometimes it's either heightened, or sometimes there's no interest. A lot of people, you know, lose interest in their spouse or in their, you know, in the wife, husband, and you know, there's just a lot of changes. And people say, oh, it's high testosterone, low testosterone. Again, boredom, confusion, resentment, anger. Again, not satisfied with marriage, not satisfied with work, عايز أغير الشغل, and so forth. And I don't want to waste time about that. So is this a true phenomena? I mean, sometimes, you know, I feel some of these things, you know, actually lately, maybe more frequently than others, and then I say, is that really true? Like this whole midlife crisis, or this is just a, you know, a stage that will pass by? And then I was talking to one of very good friends who's a very good servant, and you know, we like to chat. I've known him from Egypt, lives in Australia, and he said, you can't believe how many people in our age group, in our class, who started to have questions about, you know, does God really exist? You know, thinking more of like, you know, atheist question, and there are people from the church, and they're very good, and things like that. And he said, oh, they're going through that midlife crisis, and eventually it's going to pass. So again, is there really a, you know, a midlife crisis? So there are some titles that were nice in that book, and I would like to share these titles with you. So anybody would like to say anything? Have Ellie to make it interactive.
Is this male and female or just male?
They usually more in male than female. That's a very good point. It's usually more in male than female. There's a lot of research about testosterone levels and things that has to do with the physiology. But in females they do, but the expression of it is completely different. But a lot of this phenomena is more in male. And that's, by the way, that time that you find, you know, a lot of the husbands are not faithful to their wives anymore. They're interested, you know, there's a lot of marital issues and things like that. You never find marital issues in like the 20s or the 30s, usually in that, you know, midlife crisis. You find also that, you know, again, this whole thing about being alone and being depressed and being down, you find that a lot of people get started, you know, again, that's the easy thing in America, to start an anti-anxiety bill and depression and things like that. So usually in that, you know, in that age category. So whether this is, true or not, I'm not here to talk about that. It's a whole topic in itself, and maybe a psychiatrist can talk to us about this better than I am. But what I want to talk about, and you know, and that's what I liked when I read that book and some other things that I heard, that it seems that each one of us exists on this earth for a particular mission. You know, there is a purpose for each one of us. And if you live your life without accomplishing that mission or that goal, whatever that mission is, and that mission is not to live and work and make money and have family. There's something more than that, or larger than that. If you don't accomplish that mission, if you don't accomplish that mission, you will actually, you know, fall into that void feeling that there's just emptiness, and you're just not, you're not fulfilling something. It's like, you know, when you have a task, like sometimes I have a task to do, you know, the tax season, you know, my accountant is like, I want this before April 15th. So I'm like 24/7 occupied that I haven't done that. And every day I wake up in the morning, I'm trying to collect some of these documents and send it. But the point to make is, if I'm not done with that, you know, task, you know, if I'm not done with that task, I always feel in me this, just, I need to run to do that. If there's a deadline, I'm, you know, until that deadline comes. So it's the same thing. Apparently each one of us has that one particular mission, right? And if we don't fulfill that mission, we will fill that void. And that void is what explains that midlife crisis in me, which is going to keep going in circles and circles, trying to go from one project to the other. Some people start businesses, some people, you know, think wild.
But is the mission self-induced, or?
Okay, so that's very good, and that's what we're going to talk about. I mean, is that mission self-induced? Should I start my own mission? Should I, you know, talk to a friend and start a business? Should I, you know, go to my, you know, spiritual guidance or father of confession and say, give me something to do, go join a mission in Congo? We're going to talk about that. But the point to make, we are, as humans or as physical objects, we are just a once in a history. We have a once in a history opportunity. Some people took that, you know, once in a lifetime opportunity and made great things that everyone else followed. And some people, like Hitler and some of the other people, made things that were just terrible, you know, and they were labeled for the rest of their, you know, the history of the universe as, you know, people who are just terrible people. So this is just one thing to remember, that we have to do something, because again, we're given a start point and an end point, and if we don't do anything in between, we're just going to lose that opportunity forever. Just go here. Okay, so as we said, you know, I don't want to be ridiculous, but you know, the Bible says that we are His workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand. That goes along with that idea of that mission. I mean, every one of us has a certain mission that we should walk in Him. Okay, so you know, and how to find out what's that work that God prepared for me? Is it to be here in New Jersey in Homedale? Is it to be somewhere else? Is it, you know, to do something in the church, something outside the church, and so forth? I'm gonna try to talk about that. And it's very interesting that I see people, and you know, sometimes I even think of myself that I just grind through the day. I just keep going, drive on the parkway, go to the hospital, do the things I need to do, just come back on the parkway, do the homework, put the kids to sleep, and I just keep grinding through the day. And I see some people that I think, you know, I look up to, that they have a certain mission or vision. They do. And you know, they live a life, they have a family, they're very busy, they have jobs, they get a paycheck, but they still have that vision, they have that mission to accomplish, and it's very obvious and very clear. And when they get distracted by something else, when somebody comes in and say, hey, why don't you come join me to open a restaurant? Or why don't you come and join me to do whatever, you know, buy some stocks. They're just not interested in that because they are very focused on that mission to accomplish. So, again, a lot of it, and again, I don't want to sound like a, you know, none of ours or I'm a preacher, but it sounds like a lot of it has to be that mission has to be within that will of God, that God has a will for each one of us, has that pre-assignment, you know, that pre-assignment that I don't know about, but I need to find out what it is. And, you know, if I am in that assignment, if I'm not in that assignment, I'm in total control. And if I'm outside that assignment, أنا مش بعمل الشغل اللي أنا المفروض بعمله, I'm just lost, I'm desperate, I'm down, حاسس إن أنا فاضي، الأيام بتجري، I'm not مش مبسوط، بجيب عربية بفرح بيها من 3 وموف أون، بشتري بيت، ببقى excited، بعمل البارتي بتخلص، البيت مشاكله بتبتدي. I go on vacation, I'm happy for a week، أرجع بعد كده. It's the same thing. I buy something new, I like it, بعدين خلاص, you know. So apparently even a lot of the things that I think that it fulfills things for me, I have money in the bank, I look at my bank account, I feel that I'm secure, بس بعد كده that money just sits in the bank, I'm not feeling happy. If I'm not in that will of God, in that mission, you know, atmosphere, I am not in control, and you know, if I get fired, or if, you know, sometimes I get, you know, calls at work, and sometimes I feel like, you know what, if you don't do this or that, I'm just going to leave today. And then you feel like, well, if I left, you know, I have a mortgage to pay, so maybe I should أرجع في كلامي and be nice and so forth. But again, I'm not in control. A lot of my efforts are not fruitful. Efforts with my children, efforts at work, even for service. Sometimes we do a lot of service and visitations and calls and give talks, but there's no fruits. And sometimes a lot of people go in things, do businesses. I've known people who, 3 of my friends, they open a something similar to Starbucks style in the busiest, you know, downtown Brooklyn. The owner showed in the books that he made a lot of money. It was a very busy, you know, coffee shop and so forth. Everybody, you know, each one of them put like $150,000 in it. They bought it, and this thing was a big loss. So again, it sounds like what they did wasn't in God's will, and this wasn't the mission that they're supposed to think about. And, you know, we'll talk about that. So somebody may say, well, and I think that's an expression, maybe Jabara, bless you, or Eddie can tell us, like we call somebody Mr. Pot Roast, like, you know, just, you know, هو يعني إيه الواحد العادي يعني, the Joe, the John Doe, like, you know, if somebody comes in the hospital, they have no name, they call them John Doe, whatever. So apparently, some people say, well, this is not for me. And I'm a family man, I have kids, I have a job, that's the mission I have. But apparently that's not true, because it sounds like the people that Christ gathered around him were just, they were ordinary people. There wasn't anything special about them. None of them was a theologian. None of them had an education. Something interesting in that book that he said, none of them traveled probably outside of Galilee or Jerusalem. They never took an airplane and went to another country. Most of you travel, and you can be independent in France and in England and make phone calls, or in Mexico. You can be on the internet. You can manage the world from your cell phone. None of them had any of that ability. Actually, as funny as it sounds, they were fishermen, but when a storm happened, they just couldn't do anything. Like imagine that you go to to a plumber, and then when there's a flood, he just gets lost. He wouldn't know what to do. So it's very interesting that despite that fact, he chose them and assigned them missions to do. And if you look at their characters, as I said, the neo-theology, they have no fans. Actually, some of them, they're very insensitive. They always fought and was better. Peter was very blunt. No loyalty. كلهم كانوا جبنة. Whatever there was. The Jewish soldiers on Christ, كله خلع. Imagine مثلا if somebody coming to pick a fight here with Abuna, and then the first thing that we do, اخلع على طول, اجري. I remember back in Egypt when كنا نلعب كورة في الشارع, right? And then some other group comes to fight because they won the court. The first thing that we would do is اجري. Yeah. That was a philosophy. Just run. So that's what they did. They just had no loyalty. They ran. They all had tempers. They were angry. So my point is, there was no quality to these people. But despite the fact, so nobody can say that I have no qualities. And I think it's the biggest lie that Satan does, that convinces everyone that God has a certain IQ, or he has a favoritism. He only chooses Ihab or Fadi or Sharif or Deacon Crosby. He only has a certain IQ that he would take, and everybody else is excluded. And apparently what Christ himself did was the complete opposite. He was inclusive of a lot of people who lacked quality. And it said that God doesn't call the qualified, in fact, he has talents and qualified, but he qualifies the called. So the person who's called by God to do a mission, God will qualify him. There was many stories, and I don't want to take much of your time, about how, for example, someone in Germany who just had pity and compassion on all the Jewish kids that were, captured by Hitler, and he, I think, helped to escape about 669 kids. And he's written in the books as one of the big saviors of little children. Obviously, saved their life, prevented them from being tortured, and so forth. A lot of people back in the days when there were these cancer wards, now we don't see a lot of this with antibiotics and nursing and stuff. But they would just go in and bend. You see people like Mama Maggie and this and that on the TV. And again, you can pick anybody that you think, a person who might not have a quality, but God had chosen him and elevated him to be a person of a mission. I can, tell you about a lot of people that I know that, went through that test. I remember that that's why I wrote the word kahki hena. I think a lot of times even you might not even have the quality to do something. So back in the days in Brooklyn, there was a very nice lady that used to make kahk around the Eid time, and she would give it to the youth to go around and give it to the people who just are sick or in the hospital and so forth. And I remember واحد اسمه Milad, I should say his name, but anyway, he fell off a scaffold. Like he was in construction, he fell off a scaffold from like 10 floors, and then they broke multiple bones, and so in the hospital for so long. So she gave me kahk to take to deliver him, just the delivery. And then I took it to his house, and until this day, he never forgets that I did that, because him and his wife were very sad that he was in the hospital at home, almost close to be paralyzed from that accident, and I came in and delivered that kahk to him, and that meant a lot, because again, I'm not qualified to make kahk. I didn't know how to make it. I just drove it from that lady's house to that person, and it just had that great effect. So, I'm sorry? Right about that. One other point in that book, and again, if I go over time, please stop me. Something about this whole thing about let God unshell you. That was like something in the book. So they say that we, in this day and age, somehow the media and a lot of the environment that we live in just teaches you to be isolated. Like you just don't want to be bothered. And when I was reading that book, actually, I happened to be on an aeroplane. I was on a work trip, and then I looked around me, and everybody just has these big, headsets on their head. You don't hear anything. You don't look at anything. You just don't want to be bothered. And if you, let's say, touch the person next to you, trying to grab a conversation, whatever, they just didn't even react. And if you're a little bit more annoying, they would look at you, at least hit things on, and then just keep watching what they're watching. So apparently the world these days teaches us to be more about ourselves. Obviously, all the social media and everything like that goes in that direction. That you just want to enjoy yourself, just like as Megan put in our group. I mean, and you just want to sit in that balcony with that, cup of tea and so forth. But apparently, what God's wanted from us, I mean, we have to be outside that, shell. And the things like that, I have problems of my own, or I can't change any of my bad habits and work on that first, and then I'll think about a mission and so forth. Apparently, the only way to get out of that shell is really not to focus on any of that, not to focus on the problems that you have, and not to focus on bad qualities that you have. One of the interesting things that Abuna Dawood Lamy wrote in one of the books, that in the khidmah هي الحل, service, he looks at the mission is the service. That's his view. In the service هي الحل. I cannot wait until I get better. I cannot wait until my problem gets solved. But I have to work on starting and doing something, doing a mission, finding something for myself, fulfilling that goal, whatever that is, that God will unshell you to show you who you really are. A lot of times people have qualities they don't know about. Right? You're just, again, isolated, drowned in all the negativity that we live. But there is a lot of qualities that you may have that, again, God will help us to, to unshell that and show you what kind of work you really do. I remember one of my very close friends, he came into the church, and he was an ordinary person. He wasn't like, a deacon with a great voice. He wasn't like a servant or anything like that. He wasn't a person who was like well knowledgeable in the Bible. He wasn't just your typical, a person who's like a church person. But this person, somehow, God gave him that talent to go visit the youth. And he was able to attract a lot of people to come to the church and so forth. And he was very successful. And until this day, he has a very good service where he is to attract the youth. Just God unshelled these qualities out of him, and then he turned out to be a very good asset for the church. Something also interesting in that book, he talks about something called don't forget the bread. So he said that when his wife makes a meal and so forth, she always asks him, make sure you get bread, make sure you get bread. And then he would go out and go get toothpaste and ice cream and cookies and this and that, and then he always forgets the main focus of the shopping, that his wife just sent him home, from home to the supermarket just to get the bread, and he just didn't get the bread and get everything else. So a lot of time, and he took this in the book to a different point, but the point that I thought is, I think this whole thing about mission is not about anything except about me. Like, I think God wants from that goal or from that mission, not for me to be famous or to, people say on the internet that this person accomplished so and so. I think it's a lot of it about for me to change. And one of the interesting verses in the Bible that says, that if you have, unless you become like a seed, the kingdom of heaven, unless it becomes like a seed that goes in the ground and die and becomes a tree. So a lot of time, and he said a mustard seed. This is the kingdom of God, it's like a mustard seed. Habit khalba. So if you think about it and you read science, then if you plant a mustard seed in the ground, what would you get? You get weeds, believe it or not. That's what you get. You don't get a tree. So is the Bible, what is that? No discrepancy in the Bible is not scientific. No, actually I think what Christ meant that ordinary, if you have a seed and you put it in the ground, you're going to get weeds. But the extraordinary is that if you have a seed and that seed is in the ground and dies, that's mean you changing and accomplishing something, that the seed can become a tree. And that's the miracle. So I think a lot of this whole thing about the mission or the service or serving God in something or accomplishing a goal in life is about me to change. I think, one of the stories in that book, it talked about a person who's elder in his 60s, who, his kids left him. He's like they married and they went to some other countries, France, Europe, America, and he left alone, and he's depressed and so forth. Didn't know what to do. Would wake up every morning, just like a tasteless life. And then someone invited him and told him, why don't you come and serve with us in the church? He's like, me? I've never served. I don't even read the Bible. I don't know anything about the church. you know, I barely go. He's like, why don't you whatever, just come and you will learn. And he started taking him to visit a lot of these areas in Egypt that's called the Ashwa'iyah, which is like, you know, I don't want to say that in life, but you know, Washington Heights and going down, yeah. But it's a very dangerous areas. People live in poverty. There's a lot of, you know, gangs and, you know, a lot of, you know, crimes and things like that. So he went to the Ashwa'iyat, and then year 2, 3, 4, he eventually became the leader of that group. And you know, his service became very fruitful, despite the fact that he was just an ordinary, boring person, and he never meant to serve or to do anything. But I think that's, you know, a very good example of that seed becoming a tree rather than a seed becoming a weed, just something that has no meaning in life. So a lot of us might maybe in that stage, but I think the goal is this way. And one of the interesting things that, you know, it doesn't have also necessarily to become something very big, like you have to make a, you know, something like to take care for the orphans, or, you know, to do a mission, or to go to like Cambodia or Colombia, or, you know, but it can be also something as just simple as a cup of water, because a lot of time God is not asking for so much, He's just asking for hagat little. It says that if you even ask about someone in a text message, you know, I appreciate, myself for a couple of weeks I was very busy. Fadi sent me a text, he's like, I haven't seen you in a couple of weeks, what's going on? I smiled, put a smile on my face. I said, look, I'm just busy, this and that, and we were traveling and so forth. But, you know, it's something very simple. Yani haga, just as much as a cold cup of water, which costs nothing. Like, if you just engage in some random act of kindness, I know someone, and you know, you may call him crazy, but that's what he did back in the 80s when immigration was something that's really, like, you know, big and about. There was no cell phones and Vibers, and you don't, you know, text all your friends and get a letter from the bishop so 20 people wait for you in the airport, right? And you can call an Uber from Egypt and do all that stuff. You know, he used to wait in the airport every Sunday after liturgy with his car and look, and the people who were coming in the airplanes in a certain terminal in JFK to see which family is an Egyptian family. And then he would welcome them. Obviously they don't have a ride and they don't know anybody, and he would take them and give them that free ride. And he did that random act of kindness to so many people. Someone may hear about this and say, this guy's magnoon, for traffic and so forth, but that's what he decided to do, and God fulfilled him and made him very successful. I happen to know him. So again, it could be just a random act of kindness. And one of the things that I heard, that in every day, even every day, it's okay to wake up and say, in those 24 hours, what is the mission that you want me to do? The mission is not to take my kids to school and run to work and grab lunch and come back, pick up the kids, do homework and go to bed. That's just not, this is maybe the mission, to take care of my children, but I'm sure there's something else, even every day. We should pray and say, God, put the things that you want me to do in my way. And, you know, and I always believe that there's no, you know, coincidence in the vocabulary of God. God man, just coincidence. Like, He doesn't just put things in your way in random, just a sutfa, a bit had or something. I believe that every step, you know, in the hands of God, and God is the Pantokrator who, you know, is in control of every breath. So, you know, again, why not to ask for some of these godly coincidences to happen so you can help somebody. One other interesting point is, what? Good? I don't want to go over. Sure. You guys can stop me at any time, by the way. Is good to team up, and I think, you know, through it happens through some of the people. I know that, you know, this particular group has some, you know, interest in to do something together, and you know, apparently it's not about just doing something, but Christ Himself wanted a team. He didn't pick like one or two guys and said, look, you're in charge, you're the ones who are going to be doing this. He always wanted a group of people, a team. 12, you know, there were 70. There is a group. It's good to maybe think about, you know, engaging some of your close friends and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. You know, I think, you know, somebody told me that they're collecting some of the used soccer, you know, shoes, and they use them to send them to South America for people who love to play soccer, but they can't, you know, afford cleats and things like that. Some people had an idea, but he was worried about regulation. But what he did is he collected a lot of medication from people who don't use it, and you know, he took the responsibility to relabel them and make sure that they're all clean and so forth, and recycle them in a way. And again, you know, tools, medications, clothes. I know a group of people in East Brunswick that they take all the old clothes. They, you know, they see what's good and nice and clean. they would dry clean it, they would wash it, they would bag it, and they would send it to Egypt. It could be anything. It doesn't have to be one, size fit all. Not everybody has to be on a mission for evangelism. It could be anything. But why not to team? And he said really that if 2 or 3 did something together or gathered in my name, I will be there. So why not just to team up and try to do something? And I think the whole goal in God's mind was just that there is love, and those people, obviously in the world when people go into business together, most of the time they, if he fights and if he a lot of breakage and so forth. One other thing which is happened to me in Egypt and it's very interesting about opening your eye and heart, that a lot of time we think that we're in church and we're servants. I'm sure all of you are, and deacons and so forth. So I remember very well, I think it was the year before my last year in mid school, and there was a meeting for the people who were in charge of the service, so all the leaders from all the groups. And I remember that very well, and it was in small Jama'iyya in Sohag, and you would walk by the door, the main door, and there's like a واحدة بنت قاعدة لابسة شبشب مقطع, little dust on her hair, and we all, including myself, passed by this young girl, and شفتها. It was like a common thing to see in Egypt. تلاقي حد فقير قاعد على الباب, just waiting for Abuna to get some money, whatever, the sake, they need on vacation. The first thing that came to my mind, she's probably here was her mother, and her mom left her, maybe it was Abuna inside, and she just left her by the door. And it was a common thing in Egypt, تلاقي حد قاعد على الأرض يعني. But she looked a little off, يعني, poor, whatever. So the meeting happened, they went over all the assignments and the plans, and we had a great lecture and everything else. And Abuna at the end brought that girl and said, I just want to let you know that this is not a poor girl, this is my niece, and one of the servants came up with an idea to dress her like that, to see how many of you would just ask her, do you need anything? And actually only one out of like 100 and something that attended. I wasn't the one. Someone who was really very good, like we all knew him يعني, قال لها are you okay? بالعربي, محتاجة حاجة, مستنية حاجة, can I help you with something? He was very kind to her. And she would say, no. And he's like, no, would you like me to get you some food? Where's your mother? Where's your parents? Are you waiting for Abuna? Indeed, this person, like, يعني, it shows you how true of a servant he is. And طبعا كلنا كنا like ashamed of ourselves. And I really, like, that thing stick with me for a long time. That am I really, like, is this the true service? And then we sit in these meetings, we talk about theology and how to do things. And in the little things that we see someone like that, we just ignore them. And I remember very well that I dressed, put on a nice shirt, pants, shiny shoe, like, we pay attention to things that are not important at all, while the important things we just ignore. So I remember that very well, and I said it so many times, but and a lot of times also we write off certain people. We say this person, is not, مش مهم, like excluded or something like that. And one of the interesting things that in the St. Paul movie, that there was a scene of him, I think, killing a child with a stone, and how that he has regrets about that, and it comes to him in nightmares and so forth. And sometimes I worry that I'm that my person myself, like maybe excluding somebody or just pushing somebody away and say that you don't belong to a group. But it says here that it's important that if you decided to be on a mission, is that you have to open your eyes and you have to open your heart. And really very important to pay attention to who needs what and where. One other point is this mission has to be every day. It's coming later in a point that it's not about the 10%. A lot of us are, and including myself, very committed to service and so forth, and that 10% of the time that we spend in a church, that hour or a couple of hours on Saturday, that couple of hours on Sunday, but then how about the Monday to Friday? I mean, how about what we do outside of the church? Like, what do we do about that? Are we really the same thing, or we're just busy and different? One of my colleagues joked around with me once, قالت لي, أنت عندك وشين. وش اللي هو طيب and nice and kind, and that wish that can be a little stern and rough and so forth. And we were laughing, but then I thought about it. I said, do I really have wishing? Am I like really, because sometimes can I get a little, stern and so forth. But it's not about the 10% that we spend here and we show off that we're, good servants and we have missions and things that we do. It's about what we really do outside and what we think about outside. Going back is, if you decide to be on a mission, for sure, expect, and whatever that mission you're going to choose, or whatever that goal you're going to accomplish, whatever that service you're going to do, whatever the unshelling of yourself that you're going to do, rest assured that there will be persecution. Because that's what the Bible says, that if you decided, and not necessarily this kind of persecution that, someone will chop your head off, but people will oppose you. حد هيقول لك ما ينفعش، أو حد يقول لك no, we're not interested in that, or حد accuse you and انت maybe you're doing this to become famous, or ان انت عايز تبان or whatever. There maybe family members will be against you. They tell you that you're wasting time and you're not paying attention to the kids and so forth. But if you decided to take on this mission, be rest assured that you have had it very well. And I remember one time, we had the gathering with Abuna Tadros, and حد قال إن a lot of the تعب بيجي دايما من جوه الخدمة مش من بره. And Abuna Tadros smiled in his usual calm style and said, if you have problems and there are people who are attacking you from inside the service, know that your service is very good. Because if you have no problems, that means you don't serve. So apparently that's a very big sign that if you decide to go on a mission, there will be opposition, there will be harb, there will be mu'aksa, but we have to be up to it. A lot of people say, oh, I would love to be, in this position. I will do this, but it doesn't have to be. If we, maybe just fight against, the trouble that comes our way in the service, then maybe that's just as good. And believe it or not, once you become spiritually guided, and I think this is maybe a little bit of a higher step, a lot of the servants, God gives them boldness. Like people who عندهم شجاعة إن هم they're able to stand against problems. ما بيخافوش. You can see that in a lot of our, servants and people who lead the service, بشنو ده بقتادرس, that ما فيش خوف. I was hearing something today for Amr Fa'ir, and he's a lot of boldness, in defending, people who say that the Injil is not true and مش محرف and this and that, and he's very bold, very courageous, مش خايف. A lot of time, even in that persecution, but there's a very fine line, when you become boldness and when you become rough, that the Holy Spirit may guide you to become, very firm and very bold. We talked about that. One other thing is, a lot of time we need to remember that this mission or this job or this function or this service, and I remind myself of this all the time, because I get discouraged. We are serving Him. It's not about the bishop, it's not about the pope, it's not about Abuna, it's not about, the head of the servant. I'm not doing this for my family. There's no gain. I'm doing it for Him. In my heart, this is what I should remind myself of. I'm not expecting anything of anyone. I'm not, and these are one of the pictures that I like, and I have it, in front of me on the desk always, is that I think when he was called in the movie, and I like that scene, I think Mel Gibson did it very well. When he was called in to carry the cross, he was so annoyed. And you say, why do I have to be bothered with this? Why is it me? If you remember that scene. And then going with Christ, felt that there's something about this man. He's innocent, he's just pure, he's just loving. There's something about him. He's not a criminal. And toward the end, you can see that his attitude changed, that he's really doing this for Him. He's not doing it because he's afraid of the Romans. They're not pushing him very hard and pressing him to carry the cross, and that's what they did in the beginning. But he's really doing it for Him, genuinely. Like he really carried it to help him out. So, and I think, I try to remind myself is that if I come to the service and حد يقول لي كلمة بايخة, or if I have a mission and somebody fights with me, or someone gives me a hard time, or I don't get appreciated, or I don't get the credit, or they give the credit to somebody else. Let's say Ahab and I do something, and then everybody thinks Ahab, and no, there's no mention of me anywhere. It doesn't matter. I have to remind myself that I'm not doing this for the thankfulness. I'm doing this for the Lord. I'm doing this for Christ. And again, doing it expecting zero credit. Somebody said something good, nice and well. They said something terrible, okay, that's fine too. Let's say a lot of time ممكن تعمل حاجة, and then again someone is in charge of the service, الخدمة or so forth, or whatever it is, will tell you that was terrible, that was a bad idea, and you feel really that you really did it genuinely out of a good heart for the sake of Christ. It's okay, خلاص. I did it, I didn't want the credit, and I did it really out of a pure heart for a good reason, and خلاص. So it's very important, and I think this is something that's very important, because a lot of time when you do something, Shaitan may use circumstances around it to keep it negative and to suppress you. always do it quietly. طبعا, you know, this group is a يعني group of servants, I don't need to say about that, but we were with Abuna Ibrahim actually recently in a Bible study. He mentioned something that I like, that a lot of people like to post things in the social media, like anybody would get a, you know, and I myself did that, if like you get a word or something, or you always want to post it to get that, you know, satisfaction, or, you know, the thankfulness when everybody praises and say, good job, and so forth. It sounds like the way to go is to do it quietly, you know, like, and as Christ said in the book of Matthew, chapter 6, that when you do something, your right hand and left hand don't know, you know what, and do it fil khafa, so no one knows anything. And your Father who sees fil khafa will reward you. So very important that it's done quietly. And then the last thing to say is that, and that's maybe to answer John's question, and there's a very nice series by Abuna Dawood Lamar in Arabic that says, ماذا تريد يا رب أن أفعل? How do I find out what's my calling for? What's the mission that God wants for me? Is pray first and pray most, because as even if you're not changing, even if you're not finding what that mission is, that prayer will change you, and you'll feel that something is changing. And it took 40 years for Moses to find out what his mission was. It took many years for Joseph to find out what his mission was. It took so many other years for so many people to find out what is that calling is all about, what's the mission is all about, what's the service is all about. You know, again, am I just living that life? But I think we have to pray and keep calling. That's it. I hope that was quick and short.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Am I in trouble back then?
Quick and easy.
Am I in charge?